In a distant corner of the galaxy, far beyond the reach of Earth's primitive telescopes and fragile satellites, there existed countless alien civilizations. These beings, some humanoid, others strange and incomprehensible, had long known about humanity. To them, humans were an oddity, a species that had somehow clawed its way out of the primordial muck to build cities, create art, and wage endless wars against one another. While many advanced races dismissed humanity as insignificant, others watched with cautious curiosity. Humans were unpredictable, volatile, and surprisingly quick to adapt. They weren't powerful by galactic standards, but they possessed something few other species did: sheer determination. For centuries, these extraterrestrial observers kept their distance, content to study humanity from afar using highly sophisticated surveillance systems. Their drones hovered invisibly at the edges of Earth's atmosphere, recording every detail: the rise and fall of empires, the discovery of electricity, the invention of nuclear weapons, and even the first tentative steps into space. But despite all this progress, no one expected what happened next. It began on a seemingly ordinary day. Across the galaxy, monitoring stations operated by various alien factions detected unusual readings emanating from Earth. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a minor atmospheric disturbance, a shimmering ripple in the sky, faint and fleeting. Scientists aboard alien vessels dismissed it as a natural phenomenon, perhaps a solar flare interacting strangely with Earth's magnetic field. However, the anomaly persisted, growing larger and brighter with each passing hour. Soon, it became impossible to ignore. The distortion in the sky was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. It wasn't just light refracting or cloud shifting. It looked as though the very fabric of reality was tearing apart. Alien researchers scrambled to analyze the data, running simulations and consulting ancient texts for clues. Was this some kind of cosmic event? A black hole forming near Earth? Or could it be evidence of an unknown force manipulating space-time itself? Then, without warning, the mystery deepened. As the distortion expanded, revealing a dark void behind it, massive shapes emerged from within. Dozens of enormous structures materialized in Earth's orbit, dwarfing everything else in the vicinity. These weren't asteroids or moons. They were unmistakably artificial. Sleek, angular, and bristling with weaponry, they bore all the hallmarks of warships designed for domination. Each vessel was colossal, easily surpassing the size of the largest battleships in known alien fleets. Even the most advanced civilizations couldn't comprehend how such behemoths could have been constructed so quickly, or why they hadn't noticed them being built at all. Panic swept through the galactic community. Messages flew back and forth between alien leaders, demanding answers. How had humanity managed this feat? Had they discovered some lost technology buried beneath their planet's surface? Were they receiving help from another, older civilization? Speculation ran rampant, but no one could agree on a single explanation. All anyone knew for certain was that Earth now possessed a fleet capable of challenging even the mightiest interstellar powers. What made the situation even more alarming was the eerie silence surrounding the event. Humanity hadn't issued any declarations of war, nor had they attempted to communicate with neighboring worlds. Instead, the Star Destroyers simply hung there in the void, silent sentinels watching over their home planet. There was no aggression, no movement. Not yet. But the mere presence of those ships sent shivers down the spines of every sentient being who saw them. Alien diplomats convened emergency meetings on neutral planets and orbital platforms, trying desperately to make sense of the situation. Some argued that humanity must be bluffing, that the ships were merely empty shells meant to intimidate. Others believed the vessels were fully operational and ready to strike at a moment's notice. Either way, the implications were terrifying. If humans had indeed developed the ability to construct such formidable weapons, then they were no longer the weak, isolated species everyone had assumed them to be. They had become players on the interstellar stage, and potentially dangerous ones at that. As days passed, the initial shock gave way to dread. Alien fleets stationed near Earth's solar system went on high alert, preparing for the possibility of conflict. Scouts were dispatched to gather intelligence, but none dared approach too closely. The Star Destroyers radiated an aura of menace, their sleek hulls glinting ominously in the sunlight. Every sensor scan returned inconclusive results, leaving analysts frustrated and fearful. Whatever secrets those ships held, humanity wasn't sharing them willingly. Meanwhile, Earth itself remained eerily calm. Cities continued to bustle with activity, unaware of the chaos unfolding above their heads. News outlets reported strange lights in the sky, but governments dismissed them as weather phenomena or satellite debris. It was almost as if humanity didn't realize or didn't care that their newfound fleet had thrown the entire galaxy into turmoil. Among the alien races, whispers of fear grew louder. Stories spread of humanity's relentless drive to survive, their willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. Tales of Earth's history painted a picture of a species that thrived under pressure, emerging stronger after every crisis. Now, faced with the undeniable proof of humanity's technological leap, many began to wonder, what would happen when Earth finally spoke? Would they demand tribute, claim territory, or unleash destruction upon those who dared underestimate them? No one had the answers, but one thing was clear. The universe would never look at humanity the same way again. For millennia, they had been seen as children fumbling in the dark, too young and inexperienced to pose a real threat. But now, as the Star Destroyers loomed silently overhead, casting long shadows across the galaxy, it was evident that humanity had grown up, and they were ready to show the cosmos exactly what they were capable of. The appearance of Earth's Star Destroyers had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, leaving every alien civilization grappling with a mix of fear, confusion, and disbelief. Governments convened emergency meetings. Military commanders drafted contingency plans, and scientists worked around the clock to decipher the mystery of humanity's sudden technological leap. Yet, despite all their efforts, no one could explain how a species once considered primitive had managed to construct such awe-inspiring war machines. The silence from Earth only deepened the unease. It was as if humanity was letting the rest of the galaxy stew in its own paranoia. Then, just when tensions reached a boiling point, Earth finally broke its silence, not with a declaration of war or an ultimatum, but with something far more unsettling: a message. Across the cosmos, communication channels buzzed with activity as humanity's transmission reached countless alien worlds. The message was simple, yet chilling. We come in peace. For a moment, relief washed over many who had braced themselves for conflict. But that relief quickly turned to suspicion when they realized what accompanied the words. Attached to the transmission were blueprints, detailed designs for advanced technologies that promised to revolutionize life across the galaxy. There were schematics for clean energy reactors capable of powering entire cities without waste, medical devices that could cure diseases thought to be incurable, and tools for terraforming barren planets into lush, habitable environments. On the surface, it seemed like a generous gesture, a gift meant to foster cooperation and goodwill between humans and other species. But beneath the veneer of generosity lurked an unsettling question. Why would a species capable of building star destroyers offer such gifts so freely? Alien leaders gathered on a neutral moon base to discuss the implications of humanity's message. Representatives from dozens of civilizations filled the chamber, their expressions ranging from cautious optimism to outright dread. Some argued that the blueprints should be embraced as a sign of humanity's peaceful intentions. After all, these technologies could solve some of the galaxy's most pressing problems, from resource shortages to environmental collapse. Others, however, remained skeptical. They pointed out that humanity's newfound power made their apparent altruism seem suspicious at best, and sinister at worst. One delegate, a towering insectoid being named Zixar from the Xylothian Empire, voiced the concerns shared by many. "These designs are too perfect," he said, his voice resonating through the chamber. "They claim to bring us progress, but what if this is a trick? What if these gifts are weapons in disguise?" His words sparked heated debates among the assembled leaders. While some dismissed his fears as paranoia, Others nodded in agreement. After all, humanity's history was riddled with examples of deception and betrayal. Who was to say they wouldn't do the same on a galactic scale? Despite the uncertainty, curiosity eventually got the better of several alien factions. They decided to test the blueprints, reasoning that even if the designs were flawed, they could still learn valuable lessons from them. The Xylothian Empire, eager to prove its dominance, became one of the first to take the plunge. Their engineers studied the schematics meticulously before constructing a prototype of the compact fusion reactor described in the transmission. Initial tests yielded promising results. The reactor hummed to life, producing vast amounts of energy with minimal input. Within days, it was integrated into the Empire's infrastructure, powering everything from factories to starships. At first, the reactor performed flawlessly. Entire cities lit up with newfound brilliance, and productivity soared to unprecedented levels. News of the success spread quickly, and other alien races began adopting similar technologies based on humanity's blueprints. Medical facilities reported breakthroughs in treating previously incurable ailments, while terraforming projects transformed desolate moons into thriving colonies. For a brief moment, it seemed as though humanity's gifts truly were a blessing, a testament to their desire for peace and cooperation. But then, subtle anomalies began to surface. On Xylothia Prime, the capital world of the Xylothian Empire, small malfunctions plagued the reactor. At first, they were dismissed as minor glitches, inevitable hiccups in any new technology. However, the issues grew more frequent and severe. Power surges caused blackouts across major cities, and critical systems started failing without warning. Engineers scrambled to identify the source of the problem, but their investigations led to a horrifying discovery: hidden fail-safes embedded within the reactor's core. These fail-safes weren't designed to protect the device or its users. They were programmed to sabotage it under specific conditions. When triggered, they caused catastrophic chain reactions, rendering the reactor useless and leaving entire regions without power. Worse still, the damage was irreversible. Repairing the reactor required dismantling it entirely, a process that would take months if not years. The realization struck terror into the hearts of Xylothian leaders. Humanity hadn't given them a tool for advancement. They had handed them a ticking time bomb. Other alien races soon reported similar outcomes. A race of amphibious beings known as the Varelians adopted one of the medical devices outlined in the blueprints, hoping to eradicate a deadly plague ravaging their population. The device worked initially, curing patients with remarkable efficiency. But weeks later, those same individuals began exhibiting bizarre mutations, limbs growing where they shouldn't, organs failing inexplicably, and minds unraveling into madness. Scientists traced the issue back to the device itself, which had subtly altered the genetic code of those treated. Far from healing, it had unleashed chaos upon their biology. Even the terraforming tools proved treacherous. A desert planet colonized by the insectoid Kryn collective flourished overnight, its barren landscapes giving way to vibrant forests and crystal-clear rivers. But the transformation came at a cost. The air grew thick with toxins, making it unbreathable for most species. Crops withered and died, poisoned by chemicals leaching from the soil. By the time the Kryn realized what had happened, their colony was already doomed. As reports of these disasters poured in, panic gripped the galactic community. Alien leaders who had once viewed humanity's gifts with cautious optimism now saw them for what they truly were: Trojan horses. Each design contained hidden flaws that turned beneficial technologies into instruments of destruction. Humanity hadn't offered peace. It had delivered a calculated strike, targeting the vulnerabilities of every species foolish enough to trust them. The psychological impact was devastating. Trust between alien civilizations began to erode as paranoia took hold. Accusations flew left and right, with factions blaming each other for conspiring with humans. Civil unrest erupted on multiple worlds as populations demanded answers. Even powerful empires found themselves struggling to maintain order amidst the chaos. The unity that had once defined the galactic community crumbled under the weight of suspicion and fear, and yet humanity remained silent. Their star destroyers continued to loom ominously in Earth's orbit, unmoving and unyielding. No explanations were given, no apologies offered. It was as if they were watching the fallout unfold with detached amusement, content to let their actions speak for themselves. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy faced a threat unlike any other. Humanity wasn't armed with superior firepower or overwhelming numbers. They wielded intelligence, creativity, and a willingness to exploit their enemies' weaknesses. Every alien race now understood the terrifying truth. Humanity didn't need to fire a single shot to win. Their peace offerings had already done the damage, sowing discord and destruction across the stars. And as the full extent of their cunning became clear, one thing was certain. The universe would never underestimate humans again. The galaxy was in chaos. Alien civilizations that had once prided themselves on their technological superiority and interstellar dominance now found themselves reeling from the aftermath of humanity's so-called peace offerings. The hidden flaws in the designs provided by Earth had caused widespread devastation, leaving entire worlds struggling to recover. Power grids collapsed, ecosystems were poisoned, and populations fell into despair as trust between species crumbled. Yet, amidst the wreckage, one question loomed larger than ever. Why? Why would humanity go to such lengths to destabilize other civilizations when they hadn't even made a direct move toward war? For weeks, alien leaders debated this mystery behind closed doors. Some argued that humanity's actions were purely defensive, a preemptive strike meant to weaken potential adversaries before they could pose a threat. Others believed it was a test, designed to gauge how different species would react to seemingly benevolent advances. But no matter which theory gained traction, one thing remained undeniable. Humanity had outmaneuvered them all without firing a single shot. Then came another revelation, one that sent shockwaves through the galactic community. A group of scientists from the Quarren Alliance, a coalition of pacifist species, uncovered something buried deep within the blueprints. Hidden among the intricate schematics for energy reactors, medical devices, and terraforming tools was a pattern, a mathematical sequence embedded in every design. At first glance, it appeared random, nothing more than a string of numbers scattered throughout the plans. But upon closer inspection, the sequence revealed itself to be deliberate and precise. To the astonishment of the researchers, the sequence corresponded to an ancient code used by long-extinct civilizations to communicate across vast distances. When decoded, the message contained within the sequence was chillingly simple. Survival is not guaranteed. For many aliens, this discovery confirmed what they had feared all along. Humanity wasn't just playing games, they were sending a message. And that message was clear: trust us at your own peril. As news of the hidden code spread, panic escalated. Alien governments scrambled to recall any technology derived from humanity's blueprints, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. Entire economies were crippled, military forces rendered ineffective, and social structures fractured beyond repair. Even worse, the psychological toll was beginning to show. Populations across multiple worlds lived in constant fear, unsure whether their survival depended on cooperation with humanity or resistance against them. But humanity still hadn't issued a formal statement. Their star destroyers continued to hover silently above Earth, unmoving and enigmatic. To some, their silence was infuriating, an arrogant display of power meant to humiliate those who dared underestimate them. To others, it was maddeningly cryptic, fueling endless speculation about humanity's true motives. Were they waiting for something? Testing the resolve of their enemies, or simply biding their time until the moment was right to strike? Amidst the uncertainty, one faction decided to take matters into its own hands. The Kryn Collective, a militaristic alliance of insectoid species, announced plans to launch a preemptive assault on Earth. Their reasoning was straightforward. If humanity wouldn't explain themselves, then force would have to suffice. The Kryns assembled a massive fleet, consisting of hundreds of heavily armed warships equipped with cutting-edge weaponry. They believed that overwhelming firepower would crush humanity's defenses and bring an end to the looming threat once and for all. However, as the Kryn fleet approached Earth's solar system, they encountered something unexpected. Humanity's star destroyers didn't engage them directly. Instead, smaller vessels emerged from the shadows, sleek and agile compared to the hulking behemoths guarding the planet. These scout ships moved like ghosts, darting between the Kryn vessels with uncanny precision. Before the invaders could react, the scouts deployed holographic projectors, bathing the entire fleet in vivid three-dimensional simulations. What the Kryns witnessed next shattered their morale completely. The projections showed scenes of apocalyptic battles, human soldiers clad in advanced armor fighting alongside machines unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Swarms of drones decimated enemy fleets in seconds, while colossal mechs reduced planets to rubble with devastating precision. In one particularly horrifying sequence, a single human star destroyer obliterated an entire armada, vaporizing ships and crew alike in a blinding flash of light. None of these scenarios were real. They were mere illusions, but to the Kryns, they felt terrifyingly authentic. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Crew members aboard the invading fleet began to panic, convinced that they were witnessing their imminent demise. Orders went unheeded as chaos erupted across the command structure. Ships collided with one another in their haste to retreat, and several vessels self-destructed after their crews succumbed to sheer terror. By the time the survivors limped back to their home territory, the Kryn Collective's reputation as a dominant military power lay in ruins, all because of humanity's cunning use of psychological warfare. Word of the failed invasion spread quickly, further amplifying the fear gripping the galaxy. Alien leaders who had once dismissed humanity as insignificant now realized the full extent of their ingenuity. It wasn't brute strength or superior numbers that made humans dangerous. It was their ability to think outside the box, to exploit their enemies' weaknesses in ways no one anticipated. Whether through sabotage technologies or mind-bending illusions, humanity had proven time and again that they were masters of manipulation. Even more unsettling was the realization that humanity's tactics weren't random. They were calculated and deliberate. Every move they made served a purpose, whether it was sowing discord among rival factions or instilling fear in those who dared oppose them. The Star Destroyers themselves were symbolic of this strategy. Their sheer size and presence conveyed overwhelming power, yet they remained passive, letting their reputation do the work for them. Humanity didn't need to fight. They let their enemies destroy themselves through paranoia and mistrust. As days turned into weeks, the galaxy entered a state of uneasy stalemate. Alien civilizations, wary of provoking humanity further, began withdrawing their forces from Earth's vicinity. Trade routes were rerouted, diplomatic missions suspended, and joint ventures abandoned. The unity that had once defined the galactic community dissolved into fragmented alliances, each faction more concerned with self-preservation than cooperation. Meanwhile, humanity continued to observe silently from their orbital stronghold. Their star destroyers remained vigilant, their weapons systems powered down but ready to activate at a moment's notice. Despite the turmoil they had unleashed, there was an almost serene quality to their behavior, as if they knew they had already won. Perhaps they had. After all, humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their fleet or their technology. It was their unpredictability. No one could predict what they would do next, and that uncertainty kept the rest of the galaxy on edge. For the first time in recorded history, the cosmos faced a new reality. Humanity, once dismissed as a primitive and insignificant species, had risen to become a force to be reckoned with. Their methods may have been unconventional, even morally questionable, but their results spoke for themselves. Through clever deception, psychological manipulation, and sheer audacity, they had achieved what countless wars and treaties had failed to accomplish: respect and fear from the entire galaxy. And yet, humanity's ultimate goal remained unclear. Were they content to let the galaxy simmer in fear, or did they have bigger plans in store? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: the universe would never look at humans the same way again. The galaxy was in shambles. Alien civilizations, once proud and confident, now found themselves paralyzed by fear, distrust, and self-doubt. Humanity's star destroyers loomed silently above Earth, their weapons still unused, but their presence more menacing than ever. The psychological wounds inflicted by humanity's peace offerings continued to fester, leaving entire societies fractured and unstable. But what happened next would push the collective psyche of the galaxy to its breaking point. It started subtly, a strange signal detected by alien monitoring stations near Earth's solar system. At first, it seemed like interference or background noise, easily dismissed as a glitch. But then, similar signals began appearing across the galaxy, reaching even the most remote corners of known space. These weren't random bursts of static. They were highly sophisticated transmissions, each carrying a unique message tailored to the species receiving it. For some, the messages took the form of haunting whispers in their native languages. For others, they manifested as vivid images projected directly into their minds. And for the most vulnerable races, the transmissions became nightmares, visions so intense and personal that they left lasting scars on entire populations. One such vision targeted the Xylothian Empire, whose leaders had already suffered greatly from humanity's sabotaged fusion reactor. The transmission depicted scenes of Xylothia Prime consumed by fire, its cities reduced to ash and its people screaming in agony. Entire armies crumbled under relentless assaults by human soldiers wielding advanced weaponry far beyond anything the Xylothians possessed. In one particularly harrowing sequence, the holographic projections showed a lone human warship annihilating the Xylothian fleet with ease, vaporizing their ships in mere seconds. Every detail felt real: the roar of explosions, the acrid smell of burning metal, the cries of dying crew members. When the transmission ended, many Xylothian commanders sat frozen in their chairs, too shaken to issue orders. Other species experienced equally disturbing visions. The amphibious Varelians saw their oceans boiling away, their underwater cities collapsing as mutated creatures attacked their kind. The insectoid Kryn collective relived their failed invasion attempt over and over again, only this time the outcome was far worse. Entire planets were obliterated, their populations wiped out in an instant. Even neutral factions like the Quarren Alliance weren't spared. Their pacifist ideals were mocked in grotesque simulations where peaceful protests turned into bloodbaths, and diplomatic negotiations ended in betrayal and slaughter. What made these transmissions so devastating wasn't just their realism, it was their specificity. Each vision tapped into the deepest fears and vulnerabilities of the species it targeted. For militaristic empires, the focus was on overwhelming defeat and annihilation. For resource-dependent colonies, the emphasis was on scarcity and collapse. And for races that valued unity and cooperation, the projections highlighted betrayal and division. It was as if humanity had studied every aspect of galactic society, identifying its weakest points and exploiting them with surgical precision. As the transmission spread, panic gripped the galaxy. Populations fell into chaos, unable to distinguish between reality and illusion. On some worlds, riots erupted as citizens demanded answers from their leaders. On others, paranoia led to witch hunts, with individuals accused of conspiring with humanity being executed without trial. Governments struggled to maintain control, issuing statements meant to reassure their people, but few believed them. After all, how could anyone trust their leaders when humanity's psychological warfare seemed unstoppable? Even military forces, traditionally seen as bastions of strength and discipline, began to crack under the pressure. Soldiers reported seeing apparitions of human troops during training exercises, their faces obscured by sleek helmets and their movements unnervingly precise. Pilots claimed their cockpits were filled with phantom voices warning them of impending doom. Commanders grew hesitant to send their fleets into battle, fearing that another holographic ambush awaited them. Morale plummeted, and desertion rates skyrocketed. Amidst the growing hysteria, rumors began to circulate about the source of these transmissions. Some speculated that humanity had developed a new form of technology capable of projecting illusions across vast distances. Others believed they had tapped into an ancient cosmic phenomenon, using it to manipulate the minds of sentient beings. A few conspiracy theorists even suggested that humanity wasn't acting alone, that they had forged alliances with other, older civilizations seeking revenge against their rivals. Whatever the truth, one thing was undeniable. Humanity's psychological warfare was working. Without firing a single shot, they had destabilized the galaxy on an unprecedented scale. Civil wars broke out as factions accused each other of colluding with humans. Trade routes collapsed as merchants refused to travel, through regions plagued by fear. Scientific research ground to a halt as researchers abandoned projects deemed too risky. Even religious institutions faltered as faith in divine protection wavered in the face of humanity's seemingly omnipotent power. Yet, despite the widespread destruction, humanity remained silent. Their star destroyers continued to orbit Earth, impassive and unyielding. No explanations were offered, no demands made. It was as if they were content to let the galaxy tear itself apart while they watched from afar. To many aliens, this silence was the most terrifying aspect of all. How could a species be so calculating, so patient? What did they hope to achieve by sowing discord and fear without taking direct action? Some alien leaders tried to rally their people, urging them to resist humanity's influence. Speeches were delivered, propaganda campaigns launched, and emergency measures enacted, but none of it worked. The seeds of doubt planted by humanity's psychological warfare had taken root too deeply. Trust had been shattered, and rebuilding it seemed impossible. Even those who wanted to fight back couldn't agree on a strategy. Should they launch a coordinated assault on Earth? Attempt to negotiate peace terms? Or simply isolate themselves and hope humanity lost interest? The lack of consensus only deepened the crisis. Powerful empires fragmented into rival factions, each pursuing its own agenda. Smaller civilizations sought refuge under the protection of larger ones, only to be betrayed when resources grew scarce. Neutrals who had hoped to avoid conflict found themselves dragged into disputes they didn't understand. The galaxy, once a tapestry of interconnected cultures and alliances, unraveled into a patchwork of isolated, frightened groups struggling to survive. And through it all, humanity's star destroyers stood watch, silent sentinels guarding their home planet. They didn't need to intervene directly. Their psychological warfare had already achieved its goal. By targeting the fears and insecurities of every alien race, they had created a climate of paranoia and mistrust that ensured no unified response could emerge. Even if individual factions managed to recover from the initial shock, they would remain divided, weakened, and wary of one another. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy faced a threat unlike any other. Humanity hadn't relied on brute force or superior numbers. They had used intelligence, creativity, and a deep understanding of psychology to dismantle their enemies from within. Their methods may have been unconventional, even morally questionable, but their results spoke for themselves. Through clever manipulation and relentless unpredictability, they had proven that true power didn't come from weapons or armies. It came from the ability to shape perceptions and control narratives. As the weeks turned into months, the galaxy entered a state of uneasy limbo. Alien civilizations hunkered down, focusing on survival rather than expansion. Diplomacy gave way to isolationism, and innovation was stifled by fear of unintended consequences. Meanwhile, humanity continued to observe silently, their star destroyers, casting long shadows across the cosmos. They hadn't asked for tribute, claimed territory, or declared dominance. They had simply shown the galaxy what they were capable of, and let the rest unfold naturally. By the time the dust began to settle, one truth was clear. Humanity had won the psychological war without firing a single shot. Their greatest weapon wasn't their fleet or their technology. It was their boundless creativity and unrelenting spirit. And as the galaxy slowly pieced itself back together, every alien race knew one thing for certain. Humanity wasn't just a rising power. They were a force to be reckoned with, a reminder that the universe's most dangerous adversaries aren't always the ones who wield the biggest guns. Sometimes the deadliest threats are those who know exactly how to exploit your weaknesses, and humanity had mastered that art better than anyone else. The galaxy was a shadow of its former self. Alien civilizations, once united by trade, diplomacy, and shared goals, now existed in fragmented isolation. The scars left by humanity's psychological warfare ran deep, etched into the collective psyche of every sentient being. Trust had been shattered, alliances dissolved, and progress ground to a halt as fear paralyzed entire populations. Yet, despite the chaos they had unleashed, humanity remained an enigma, a silent observer whose ultimate intentions were still unknown. Then, just when it seemed the galaxy might never recover, humanity made their final move. It wasn't through another transmission or holographic projection. This time, they chose to address every individual being directly. Using the same technology that had delivered their earlier messages, humanity broadcast a single message across the cosmos, not to leaders, diplomats, or military commanders, but to every sentient mind capable of receiving it. The transmission began with images of Earth, its vast oceans, towering mountains, sprawling cities, and diverse cultures. There were scenes of humans working together to build skyscrapers, exploring distant lands, creating art, and celebrating life. But there were also darker moments. Wars fought over ideology, environmental disasters caused by greed, and communities torn apart by hatred. These visuals painted a complex picture of humanity, not as conquerors or saviors, but as flawed, resilient beings striving to survive against all odds. As the imagery unfolded, a voice emerged, not spoken aloud, but felt within the minds of those who listened. It was calm yet firm, carrying an authority that demanded attention. "We are humanity," the voice said, "a species born on a fragile planet, surrounded by dangers both natural and self-inflicted. For millennia, we struggled to understand ourselves, to rise above our instincts and create something greater than ourselves. And though we have made mistakes, and will continue to make them, we have always found ways to endure." The tone shifted slightly, growing more somber. "When we looked to the stars, we saw countless civilizations older, wiser, and stronger than us. We knew we were young, inexperienced, and vulnerable, but we also understood one truth. Survival is not guaranteed. Not for us, and not for you." At this point, the transmission paused, allowing the weight of the words to sink in. Across the galaxy, billions of beings sat in stunned silence, grappling with the implications. Then the voice returned, its tone sharpening. "You feared us because we were unpredictable. You underestimated us because we were young. But let this be your lesson. Unpredictability is our strength. Our creativity, our adaptability, and our determination set us apart. We do not seek conquest, nor do we desire conflict. What we want is simple: coexistence." The message continued, outlining humanity's terms for peace. They proposed open lines of communication, mutual respect for sovereignty, and a commitment to sharing knowledge responsibly. In exchange, they promised to dismantle their star destroyers and cease their psychological operations. However, the ultimatum was clear: reject these terms and humanity would respond with consequences beyond comprehension. To drive the point home, the transmission concluded with a final vision, one that left no room for misinterpretation. Every alien race witnessed a simulation of what humanity could achieve if pushed to the brink. Entire fleets reduced to ash in seconds, planets stripped of resources and rendered uninhabitable, civilizations erased from existence without warning or mercy. The message was unmistakable. Humanity had already demonstrated their ability to destabilize the galaxy without firing a shot. If provoked further, they wouldn't hesitate to escalate. When the transmission ended, an eerie silence fell over the galaxy. Alien leaders convened emergency sessions debating whether to accept humanity's offer or prepare for war. Some argued that humanity's demands were reasonable. especially given their demonstrated capabilities. Others insisted that submitting to humanity's terms would only embolden them, leading to future aggression. Tensions flared as factions clashed, each side convinced of their righteousness. But amidst the discord, a surprising development emerged. Ordinary citizens, weary of fear and uncertainty, began speaking out in favor of peace. On worlds ravaged by civil unrest, protests erupted demanding an end to hostilities. Artists created works celebrating unity, while scientists called for collaboration rather than competition. Even some military leaders, haunted by the psychological toll of humanity's tactics, advocated for diplomacy over destruction. Slowly but surely, a grassroots movement took shape, urging governments to embrace humanity's proposal. Recognizing the shifting tide, several prominent alien races stepped forward to negotiate. Among them were representatives from the Xylothian Empire, the Quarren Alliance, and even remnants of the Kryn Collective. Together, they formed a coalition tasked with drafting a formal response to humanity's ultimatum. After weeks of deliberation, they agreed to accept humanity's terms, acknowledging that resistance would only lead to further devastation. Humanity's reply was swift and concise. Without fanfare or celebration, their star destroyers began breaking apart, their massive hulls disassembling into smaller components that drifted harmlessly into space. Holographic projections ceased entirely, and Earth's skies returned to normal. For the first time in months, the galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief. Yet the aftermath of humanity's actions lingered long after the crisis had passed. Alien historians documented the event, referring to it as the Awakening, a moment when the galaxy realized the true cost of arrogance and complacency. Lessons were learned, albeit reluctantly. Many civilizations adopted policies of transparency and cooperation, recognizing that secrecy and mistrust had nearly led to their downfall. Others invested heavily in understanding human psychology, hoping to prevent similar crises in the future. For humanity, the outcome was exactly what they had hoped for. By demonstrating their ingenuity and resolve, they had secured a place among the stars, not as conquerors or victims, but as equals. Their star destroyers may have vanished, but their reputation endured. No longer seen as primitive or insignificant, humans were now regarded with a mixture of awe and caution. They had proven that power wasn't measured solely by weapons or wealth. It was defined by the ability to inspire change and command respect. In the years that followed, Earth became a hub of interstellar activity. Diplomatic envoys arrived regularly, eager to learn from humanity's unique perspective. Trade agreements flourished, cultural exchanges enriched societies, and joint research projects pushed the boundaries of science and technology. Humanity's flaws remained evident. They were still prone to disagreements, mistakes, and occasional lapses in judgment, but so were the aliens they interacted with. And perhaps that was the most important lesson of all. Perfection was unattainable, but progress was possible, if everyone worked together. As the galaxy slowly healed, one question remained unanswered. Why had humanity chosen such an unconventional path? Some speculated that they had acted out of necessity, knowing they couldn't compete with older civilizations through traditional means. Others believed it was a calculated gamble, designed to force the galaxy to recognize their potential. Still, others thought it was simply human nature, an innate drive to challenge norms and defy expectations. Whatever the reason, one thing was undeniable. Humanity had changed the course of galactic history forever. Their methods may have been controversial, even morally ambiguous, but their results spoke for themselves. Through sheer audacity and ingenuity, they had proven that even the youngest, weakest species could reshape the universe, if they dared to dream big enough. And so, as starships from countless worlds traveled to and from Earth, bearing gifts, knowledge, and goodwill, humanity stood proudly at the center of it all. They hadn't sought dominance or glory. They had simply wanted to survive. But in doing so, they had taught the galaxy a valuable lesson. Never underestimate the power of creativity, resilience, and sheer determination. Because sometimes, the greatest weapon isn't a fleet of star destroyers, It's the unrelenting spirit of a species determined to thrive against all odds.